The following video contains spoilers. The correct subtitles, which includes extra notes and citations, are also available in the settings which I've added. Released by Tokuma Shoten in 1985, Angel's Egg is a Japanese art film and animated cult classic written and directed by Mamoru Oshii, creator of Ghost in the Shell, and a collaboration between him and the artist Yoshitaka Amano. Interestingly enough, the Japanese word for angel is never used in the film. Once again, if I speak in absolutes, it doesn't mean you have to agree with anything said in the video, especially considering it's a mood piece. Even the director himself said that the film's interpretation is to each his own. As the film features minimal dialogue, the intended meaning of Angel's Egg is very strong in its allegorical nature, portrayed through visuals and symbols, leaving many viewers confused by the film. As such, a combination of the surrealist and esoteric nature of Angel's Egg's allegories, and having no official explanation from the creators, makes this another art film open to multiple or even conflicting interpretations, which I'll be presenting. As a result, because there are so many ideas and interpretations to this film, you are very much entitled to interpret this film however you want. It's one of those films where the themes are vague enough that it relies on the viewer's experience to bring individual meaning. I won't be getting too philosophical in this video, as I wanted to stick to Oshii's central inspiration, Christianity. That being said, for such a structurally simplistic film, I actually found it very hard to find any tangible line of reasoning which would carry all the way through the film. Hence, this analysis, like the film itself, will probably feel less fluid, more disjointed, and conflicting than the other films I've covered. Most, if not all, of Angel's Egg's symbols appear to be religious in nature, Christianity to be exact. As someone raised Christian, I found its elegant visual discussion, exploration of faith, and existentialism to be particularly engrossing. And in researching this film, I kept finding assertions from multiple sources that Oshii, the director, was not only interested in Christianity, but had been raised Christian, and even planned to enter the seminary before he became disillusioned and lost his faith. However, it seems that Oshii hasn't made many explicit mentions to Christianity, and when he does, in one of the only quotes I found from an interview by Carl Gustav Horn, Oshii says, quote, "I'm not a Christian, but I've been reading the Bible since my student days." Regardless, the visually breathtaking film is laced with biblical references and symbols of Christian theology. And whilst I know I said not to take anything I say as utter absolutes, and the exact nature of Oshii's religious history is vague, the certainty that religious symbolism occurs throughout the film comes from Oshii himself. He said, "I use it as a prototype for my stories, not for religious reasons, but for ideology and literary inspiration." When asked why Christian motifs were inserted into the film, Oshii answered, "Christianity always ends up present." The story is structurally simplistic. Angel's Egg follows the life of an unnamed young girl who lives alone in an undefined building near what appears to be an abandoned city, and an older boy or man searching for answers. The girl cares for a large egg, which she hides under her dress, scavenging for food, water, and bottles in this decrepit, dilapidated neo-Gothic and Art Nouveau cityscape. I want to spoil an interpretation because I think this will help in connecting some of the symbolism I'll be covering. It is speculated that the dead and rotting ruins they live in may very well be the Ark from an alternate version of Noah's Ark, where God seems to have either forgotten or abandoned after the flood. I'll explain this in more detail later if you're unfamiliar with this. In the opening, we clearly see the girl's pale, childlike hands morph into the tanner right hand of the more mature male vagabond. Not only can this highlight the contrasts between their faith, but hands can be symbolic of strength, power, and protection, which are found in Psalms and Isaiah of the Bible. Therefore, the sequence can be seen as foreshadowing what is to come. If we look at the sequence, the girl's hands are open, as if she's protecting the egg. Not only can the girl's hands appear to cup something like the egg, but her hands could be praying. Whilst the most common hand prayer gesture can imply submission, her open palms can be associated with truth, honesty, and openness, a symbol of her willingness to receive whatever God has in store for her. On the other hand, the transition to the man's right hand, which could be symbolic of logic and aggression, closes into a fist as if he's crushing something, fortified by the crushing sound effect. It could also be a reference to the idiom to lend a hand, pointing to the bond and friendship that will develop between the characters and their subsequent broken trust. Unsettling music then accompanies the visual of the Foetal Avianoid, a creature featuring bird-like characteristics in the egg. The title of the soundtrack, Egg's Dream, suggests that the egg is dreaming. This is a concept which the film makes verbal mentions to approximately 38 minutes into the film, marking it as important. Storm clouds brew behind the egg, conveying that whatever this thing is, its gestation is a threat and its birth will bring catastrophe. As the camera inches closer, we see the creature's eyelids twitch as if they're about to open. Whilst we see fossils and eggs, we never actually see these bird-like creatures hatched. The music grows more ominous, which only serves to intensify this feeling of dread. Moreover, whilst bird-like, it's clear the creature isn't exactly a bird. As per Layla Ham, it's enough to communicate that if this is an angel egg, then you probably don't want to meet an angel. Following this, we meet an unnamed boy, or man, in militant garb and armed with a cross-shaped weapon. The physical portrayal of him as a Christ-like figure is further fortified by the bandages, which can connote crucifixion on the cross. In this scene, the boy crusader stands on black and white tiles, facing a giant orb-shaped vessel, which resembles an eye, against the backdrop of the red sky. It's as if he's a pawn or a piece on a chessboard or stage, which could point to this idea of being played by God. I think this suggestion will hold more weight later, when we learn more about the boy, his views, and glean just how skeptical he is when compared to the girl. The red sky can also be representative of the inside of a womb, suggesting that the world is not born yet. It appears this orb could be the closest thing to God. Its gaze is half open. God is not fully awake nor sleeping. God may be straddling this realm of the waking and dreaming, and of reality and illusion. If the orb or God in this interpretation technically lacks consciousness, does God himself know he's playing God as a player of the stage? Another position is that the soundtrack Mechanical Sun suggests it is exactly that. It begs the question, why a mechanical sun? If this world was abandoned by God, it's no wonder there's no sun. We saw clouds before behind the egg, but perhaps what we're seeing is false. We then get a close-up of this orb, revealing it to be covered in goddess-like statues. It's like a living graveyard. It could be interpreted that the statues are frozen in their last moment, having resigned to hopelessness. They appear to pray, but they don't know who they should even be praying to. A female voice asks, "Who are you?" It is unclear whether this is his own internal monologue, the orb, or even the voice of the girl. This motif of who the characters are recurs in the film. The eyes of the characters themselves are half open, supporting this idea that they are only half conscious, deathless, and not really alive, compelled by their nature. The girl acts with purpose, but why she does is not known to her. The orb's whistle then awakens the girl, cradling an egg which she believes will eventually hatch. The egg could symbolize the girl's innocence. It's something she holds onto and protects, but is ultimately stolen. Firstly, one interpretation is that the egg could be a spiritual seed which is planted in the human soul via the gospel of Jesus Christ. It could also symbolize hope, carrying special weight in this world devoid of life. It therefore is often taken to represent the girl's blind faith. The girl and the egg have also been posited to mean other things, namely that the girl is the angel in the title of Angel's Egg. Let's talk about the young girl's design for a moment. Visually, she sharply contrasts the primarily blue-toned background. She stands out, monochromatic, with her white hair, pale skin, and pink striped dress. She appears pure, angelic, virginal, or even God-sent. In conjunction with the film's consistent use of negative space, meaning empty space around the subject, it highlights the girl's hair as if, alongside the egg, is one of the only bright things left in this world. Despite also having light hair, I would say the boy's hair appears to be tainted, being more of a light greyish blue in some scenes as opposed to a white. He also sports 2 teal beads in his hair, a blue cloak, and is tan, blending slightly better with the darker blue background. Regardless, the young girl's tones clash and contrast with the Crusaders and the aesthetic of her surroundings. Throughout the film, the girl can be interpreted to have a close association with the Virgin Mary. The affiliation is based on her blind care for the egg, keeping it warm. Protecting it under her dress, it makes her appear as though she is pregnant. Like the bird-like creature at the beginning of the film, eggs, whether fertilized or not, are a symbol of fecundity, meaning reproductive capacity. The girl as Virgin Mary is also rooted in the idea of her being a savior for those trapped in the Ark, if they are indeed living on the Ark. The egg brings unbound potential for its birth. It's her only hope in this world. As a pseudo-mother, she's a bringer of life in this void-like world. Then she begins her day of scavenging. Most importantly, we see she's infatuated with water, collecting it in bottles at home. Blessed water has connotations with being holy. And unlike the other's hatred of never-ending water, the girl accepts and even drinks it. This is something the boy would never dare to do, later rejecting her offer for a drink. For the boy and the stone people, water is a prison. It keeps them locked inside the Ark, but for the young girl it signifies life and rebirth. She drinks the water willingly, which also has parallels with taking communion. And to paraphrase part of Corinthians, if you take communion in a quote unworthy manner, you will be guilty of sinning. It could be why the boy, perhaps a depiction of having lost his faith and therefore being unworthy, is afraid of drinking the water. Some well-known examples illustrating the importance of water in Christianity include namely that Christ walked on water and transmuted water into wine. Again, we get this theme of dreams, as the girl seemingly falls asleep, envisioning herself sinking slowly into water. Not only does this foreshadow her death, we also get another parallel where this submergence of water can be a visual portrayal of baptism. Baptism, and therefore by extension water, can symbolize purification of the soul. We then see plenty of foreboding shots of the girl peeking into windows, although the angles also come from within the windows, peeking back at her, instilling this sensation of being watched, heightening this sense of lurking danger. Despite being largely a dead world, the feeling of being watched almost makes it feel alive. We also get this contrast again, where seeing the girl from the window makes the darkness of the surrounding world appear cavernous. The girl is lit as if she's the only guiding light or hope in this world. Soon the girl crosses paths with the boy on a wide street, which is travelled by only biomechanical roving tanks. The girl is frightened by the boy, who is carrying a cross-shaped device over his shoulder. The cross, a symbol of Jesus, his resurrection, and Easter Sunday, can therefore be symbolic of hope. It could also symbolize the responsibilities of the boy, still carrying his staff resembling a crucifix, aren't over. Whilst he carries this symbol, the cross, the boy's burden may not be with faith, but his rationality, his need to know. Moreover, when we compare the artificial cross with the nature-occurring egg, it could highlight a contrast between true faith and overt displays of fake faith. An egg can also be symbolic of new life, whilst the cross can indicate the taking of a blood sacrifice. The girl runs off down into an alley, resuming her ways of investigation and scavenging. She finds glass bottles and food, avoiding the statuesque figures that clutch harpoons. The girl ends up meeting the boy again, approaching him this time. Having forgotten her egg at the plaza, the boy ends up, to her surprise, producing the accidentally abandoned egg. He tells her to keep precious things inside you or you will lose them, before returning her egg. We get the first verbal confirmation of their conflicting beliefs. The boy asks the girl what she believes is inside the egg. The girl says she cannot tell him. He then suggests breaking the egg to find out. His darker colour scheme blending into the background and older character design can signal that he's seen more, experienced more, and is perhaps jaded, believing there to be nothing inside the egg. The boy or man is much more skeptical than the girl. As this mother figure, his suggestion, prematurely delivering this figure akin to her baby, incenses the girl who has blind faith in this egg, ultimately driving her away. The girl is, in comparison, represented by a child, as her growth, learning to let go of blind faith, is also better reflected by the developmental journey of a child. Unlike the warrior-like boy who knows to expect the worst, the girl as a child likely hasn't had any experience that would ruin her blind faith, hence her optimism. The girl having run off again is followed by the boy. Eventually the pair bond, traversing together the apocalyptic world while scavenging for food and water. We also see what appears to be the remains of a shipwreck, alluding to Noah's Ark scattered about this world. Aside from the girl's hair consistently standing out against the dark negative space surrounding her, more contrast is evoked through shadows, some of which look like prison bars or like the bones of ancient creatures. At other times, it deliberately swallows the street whole. Once again, the girl is haloed and placed under light, whereas the boy blends and melds with the background. Darkening shading is really used, presenting this clearly defined world of black and white, highlighting the dichotomy of this film and, by extension, the diametrically opposed belief systems of the boy and girl. Fishermen first appear next to a fountain in the ruins, with their appearance closely related to the statues on the orb. Soon after, it begins to rain, which may denote the coming of the biblical flood. They observe stoic fishermen come to life, attempting ineffectually to harpoon the giant shadows of coelacanth fish, which waft over the streets. Instead, the fishermen hit only brick and stone as the shadows swim away. The statuesque fishermen don't move until the fish appear, as though they're neither human nor beast. These symbols, the fish and fishermen, are popular and obvious symbols which recur in Christian mythology. The fish are seen as a holy being or godly visage. One interpretation is that this iconography could suggest that the fishermen are chasing, out of blind faith, after an ever-elusive god, and their persistence in hunting these fish, which is blindly rooted in stubborn traditions and beliefs, only serves to cause damage and destruction to their surroundings. They don't realize that by trying to reclaim intangible faith blindly, they only cause destruction to the tangible. In a similar vein, another interpretation of the fish is that they are based on coelacanths, which are living fossils, as they were thought to be extinct only to be discovered alive. The lifeless and mechanical fishermen are therefore like coelacanths, living fossils. The fishermen look dead, and they have no other objective than to chase the fish. Technically, they shouldn't be alive, but they are, straddling this existence between life and death. Yet another interpretation is that the fish are negative representations of faith, fallen angels which lead men to destruction. Regardless, all three interpretations imply that the fishermen are chasing after something which cannot be caught, and striving to do so will only cause destruction. Another common interpretation is that the fishermen don't exist. Rather, they are phantoms or ghosts, inhabitants of the past. In the next scene, the girl comes across the ruins of a hall, resembling a cathedral with its stained glass windows. Firstly, she looks up at the ceiling, which resembles the hull of a ship. This can be taken as an allusion to the Ark even before it's verbally mentioned. If we take a closer look at the stained glass, which we glean values and lessons from the scenes depicted, we see the fish depicted in the panel, reaffirming the idea that they are holy creatures that were worshipped. Taking a look at the boy's cloak, another angle is that his cloak, similar to the fisherman's, was once similar all the same, but realizing his religion was empty, stopped chasing after the fish out of blind faith. His renunciation of faith is what ultimately drives him. It is then revealed that, heading towards the girl's settlement, her home is essentially a mausoleum of ancient creatures. It appears that the world is populated by these carcasses of Leviathan, which form building frames for the architecture. The Leviathan is mentioned throughout the Bible and is depicted as a fire-breathing seven-headed creature, embodying chaos by causing upheaval in the waters and threatening to eat the damned or God's creations. The boy then notices an engraved tree on a pillar. As he touches it, he recalls a similar tree which grew, holding a giant egg of a sleeping bird. The girl asks the boy what the bird dreams of. One stance considers that the tree is Yggdrasil. Whilst its origins are rooted in Norse mythology, the tree is similar to the biblical tree of life. The tree, egg, and bird are thus connected as symbols of life, with the egg akin to the seed of the tree. An interpretation of this film is that due to its surrealism, it is a dream. The vast amount of negative space in the film, backgrounds of black nothingness, amplifies the emptiness of the world and how the scenes are half-formed, like in a dream. Moreover, at times the film feels narratively comprehensible, but at other times disjointed. As well as the dialogue, both the girl and the giant bird-like creature in the beginning have dreams. It could be that the current setting is the large avianoid's dream, or maybe even the girl's. The boy then asks if the girl will still not tell him what is inside her egg. The pair then ascend the stairs, where there are bottles of collected water on each step. Before the girl sleeps, the boy asks her, "Who are you?" The pair then reflect on this recurrent theme of their amnesia in this world without memory. In the beginning, it appears as though the orb has asked the question, "Who are you?" But this female voice can belong to the girl, in which, if we count this instance, asks the man this question 4 times. This scene, when he gives her egg back before she falls asleep on her bed, and finally after he has broken her egg and walks out of the city. In the beginning and final scene, she is not present when this question is asked, as if to direct the question towards the viewer. The second time, he doesn't respond, but during the third, he returns her question. During this instance, she does not really hear him ask her this as she drifts off to sleep. Everything in this film is cyclical, including the dialogue. "Who are you?" is asked at the beginning but also the end. Not only this, "Who are you?" is repeated 3 times as the last 3 lines of dialogue. "Who are you?" is a question he likely has for himself. By asking and searching for clues as to who she is, he hopes to understand himself. Their fates are intertwined, with the answers to who they are lying in the other. Both these characters are nebulous and abstract. We never get to know their life stories. Although it's perhaps important to note that the question is always asked in present tense, are instead of were. It could be interpreted that he's not asking about their past history, but their current identity. Although they are on the same path, they are on different journeys. By asking when she can't hear him, it can demonstrate that the boy is the only one caught up in the question of his own identity. Because unlike him, although the film points to her having memory loss, the girl knows who she is. She already has an identity and purpose. She's the mother to her egg. The girl, insisting that the bird does exist, proceeds to lead the boy to an ancient fossilized skeleton, believing it to be the giant bird. Neither fully avian nor human in form, the girl is blind to the horrors of this nightmarish creature. One interpretation is that as a bird, the fossil represents freedom. Another interpretation is that the angelic bird is an angel, particularly the angel of death. To expound, in this interpretation, if we go back to the idea that the tree which holds and supports the eggs etched into the wall was the tree of life, the tree sucks its life, enriching itself with organic remains of the dead which fertilize the soil. The more life dies, the richer the soil is, and in turn the more fruit, or in this case eggs, the tree bears. Therefore, death is not only necessary to maintain life, but life grows and dies, which as a result feeds itself. This cycle of life and death is also what drives the pairs' lives, creating meaning for them. To add, it should be considered that the girl believes her egg to be different from the angel of death. Both interpret differently what the egg could be. The girl optimistically believes it to be an angel of life, living and flying freely. Contrastingly, the man instantly connects her egg with the angel of death, causing his apprehension towards the egg. It's ironic that the girl's evidence of life is considered by the boy to be a museum or memento mori for inevitable death. Despite being bothered by his lack of memory in this world, which causes him to wander aimlessly, the boy, not knowing what death could feel like, perhaps fears the egg would be the end of his existence entirely. As touched upon, the girl doesn't have any apprehensions about the egg. She doesn't appear to care. She lives an existence without memory. She waits excitedly, unfazed by the prospect of the egg hatching. Again, it can come back to this contrast of young versus old. Whilst the young are depicted as living in the moment, facing the future with positive feelings. In contrast, it could signal that the older you get, the more you are confronted with the worry of mortality. Consequently, the possibility that the egg hatching will not end well doesn't even enter the girl's mind. Yet another interpretation is that this egg neither hatches into an angel of death nor of life. Instead, the egg is representative of her life. In conversation, the girl maintains she can hear the breathing of the egg, hugging it happily, but the man casts doubt on this yet again. He tells her that it's her own breathing she hears. The boy, having waited a long time for the bird to come and believing it never will, insists the egg needs to be broken. We need to see it for ourselves to be certain. Her lyrical waxings are again contrasted against his blunt debunkings of her theories through logical explanations like it's just the wind. As such, the boy can represent warnings against the romanticization of religion or even representation of humanity that collectively questions and shuns the grace of God, which in return causes God to abandon them. The egg can also represent a false idol. The boy is a paradox himself. His portrayal as a Christ-like figure is ironic, considering that he haunts and stalks her instead of guiding her like divinity would. Secondly, the man doesn't provide answers, but is a cynic that questions instead. As opposed to Christ himself, perhaps the man is more of a personification of unavoidable truth. In this alternate interpretation, the egg could be a symbol of her own life. Its hatching would signal her end. With life comes death. Yet again, instead of fearing what is actually physically inside the egg, the older boy may be fearing what it represents. Birth is a reminder of death. Consequently, the sight of the giant bird or angel affects the boy deeply, and as we see later, he breaks her egg. With their philosophical sparring and design contrasts, I want to touch upon the potential theme of masculine in contrast to the feminine in this film. This theme is very clearly evoked by the characters. One is male and the other is female. The boy is also a warrior, stereotypically masculine, whilst the other is a virginal mother, stereotypically feminine. Finally, it is alluded to by their respective psychologies. One is unemotional, stoic and guarded, quite literally by a cross-shaped weapon. He's also guarded in terms of information. The boy asks questions but controls his answers. Throughout the film, we witness moments of destructive power, a stereotype of masculinity. For instance, not only is his character warrior-like, during their first encounter, he enters in the scene via what appears to be a tank. This parade of tanks with pulsing metal veins featuring the sharpness and organic nature of other designs are still marching aimlessly in a war which has been long dead. Aside from guarding information, this controlling behavior is exhibited in the pair's second encounter when he takes and returns her egg. Instead of giving it back instantly, he waits for her to panic and only returns the egg at the time and place of his choice. On the other hand, we have this young, emotional, frail, innocent girl. She's also nurturing and caring towards this egg as if she's its mother. As discussed, she's this holy virgin mother, radiating in the darkness, but like any good mother, her child becomes her reason for being. I'll touch more on this later when the egg actually breaks. And like any mother, she wonders about her child. She wishes for the best, believing that it will hatch into either a bird or an angel. Moreover, as female, another distinction of the feminine is made, as she will technically be the only one able to reproduce. This has further implications as the egg, this pseudo-child, mirrors the eggs of the Tree of Life. Those eggs, cradled by the trees, suck the life of the world which they were born into. Connotations of blood vessels and the umbilical cord are reflected in the imagery of the tree's branches and roots. We see this constant struggle between boy and girl, like mother and father, over the egg. It may tie into this notion of feminine intuition or mother knows best, but the boy's masculine rationality can be a metaphor for a father's hatred towards the parasitic relationship of a child to its mother. Within the first 20 or so minutes, the film only features one line of dialogue: "Who are you?" Most of the dialogue is from the boy's soliloquy, musing on the supposed history of their world. After seeing the corpse of the angel or bird, the man recalls an alternate history by reciting lines directly from the book of Genesis. He tells the biblical story of the flood and Noah's Ark. If you're unfamiliar with Noah's Ark, in the original story, God decides to flood the earth as he sees it as corrupt and violent. God wasn't trying to destroy earth, rather he was trying to restore the goodness of his creation. As a righteous and blameless man, Noah was commanded by God to build an ark, which is basically a ship to house his family and 2 of each living thing. The water floods the earth, and to find land, Noah sends out a dove, which brings an olive leaf, suggesting that the flood has receded. However, in the boy's monologue, the dove, which could represent all the souls of humanity, never found evidence of ground and didn't return. There is an interpretation that the world they live in is already submerged in water. Credence is given to this theory by the girl's overt fascination with water, envisioning herself surrounded by it, because she already is. Moreover, the shadow fish from before may not be illusions, but actual shadows of fish floating above them. They are submerged in water because in this interpretation, they never left the ark. The dove never returned. It brings us back to the theme of lost memories. The original passengers of the ark, whilst waiting for the dove, forgot why they were sailing, why they sent the dove out, or even that there was a dove in the first place. This forgotten civilization sinks into the waters below them, and after such a significant passage of time, all of the animals had fossilized, turning to stone. Hence, in this account, the world the girl and boy traverse in are the remains of Noah's Ark. And if the boy is truly Christ, the Son of God, perhaps his crucifix is what cultivated potential life or hope in the form of these giant eggs. The 2 characters opposite of each other meet. Initially they work together, building their bond, but these 2 opposites, unwavering faith and a lack of, are unable to coexist. As the girl drifts off to sleep, the streets are consumed by rain and flooded. The boy's stoicism breaks when the girl leads him to the skeletal remains of the giant bird. This sight affects him immensely, leading him to this momentous decision, which he ponders over in a 2.5-minute slow pan. The boy breaks the egg arguably out of immense fear. The shattering of the girl's egg could also be read as getting the girl to face reality, forcing the truth on her. Although others see this action as intentional malice, especially when he's confronted by his own lack of faith and ambition. The egg is something the young girl protects without really knowing why, amongst the dark, decrepit world, but is reaped eventually by the Christ-like character after she had journeyed and placed her trust in him. The boy leaves before he can witness the consequences of his actions. Again, returning to this stereotype of stereotypically masculine behaviour. Ultimately, in this interpretation, he's a coward, wanting all the answers but not granting others the same courtesy. After waking, the girl discovers the broken remains of her egg. She lets out a blood-curdling scream. Her child or egg is dead. We see that there's nothing inside the egg to show her loss of faith, understanding that it never would have been rewarded, or even potentially the loss of innocence, which children tend to have when believing what they are told. Alternatively, it could be a symbol of her clinging to false hope, only to have it broken later. This could be why she screams after finding the broken egg, because her faith system has come crashing down, as well as being betrayed by someone she trusted. It could also be a reference to the dynamic between religious leaders and their followers, and how that trust is sometimes betrayed. We never know if nothing was intended, or if it could have become an angel had it not been prematurely hatched. The boy is nowhere to be found. He leaves her with no possibility of closure for her despair, nor an explanation for her heartbreak. On one hand, he is clearly seen in this negative light, or perhaps selfishly satisfying his own curiosity, but on the other, he is viewed as her companion and protector. I should also note that it is strongly alluded that he breaks her egg with his cross, a Christian symbol of hope. It has been theorized that this cross is phallic in shape, and by forcefully penetrating this egg, like SA, it embodies this loss of innocence. At some points in the film, although he is unable to face her at the end, the boy can even be viewed as kind. When it rains, he offers his cloak. When she's scared, he lets her hide behind him. Before she sleeps, he tenderly carries her to the bed and gently removes her hand. In this argument, he leaves precisely because he's kind. It doesn't seem to be done out of malice, and he doesn't want to hurt her. He uses his crucifix to break or abort her egg, perhaps referencing Matthew chapter 16:24, to help bring to fruition what she couldn't have done alone. Acting as a spiritual midwife, he helps deliver the full potential of the egg, which could be interpreted as the gospel seed, as opposed to selfishly keeping it hidden. Regardless, her egg is not the angel of death, but with the death of her egg, the purpose for her life ceases to exist. Up until this point, we saw at times a motherly glow haloing the girl. This has disappeared. The girl cradles her flat stomach. Faced with shattered beliefs, she chases after the boy only to fall into the river, though this frees her from her own hell. When she falls to her death, the moment is suspended in time. Hitting the water's surface, the girl, as she's done before, stares at her reflection, of which is a grown adult woman. The water is linked to the girl's death and womanhood. Breaking water by falling can be correlated with water breaking before childbirth, bringing us back to the theme of motherhood and womanhood. Water acts as an important spiritual solvent here, not only removing her old self, but her real self is also subsumed. The girl collapses into this older self, accepting this kiss of death. It may be that her older self, forced to mature and having lost her childlike innocence, is now aware of the cruelties in this faithless world. And having realized her misplaced faith, the woman accepts her death. Alternatively, it could signify that the young girl has reached spiritual maturity in her pursuit of Christ. It has been theorized that the cross and the bandages indicate that the boy is Christ, that was also forgotten and left behind. Others have claimed the man could be Adam or Noah. If we reason that the boy was Christ, it could be read that he was constantly testing her faith, trying to get her to shatter the egg. Christ failed, with her faith standing strong. She touches her now flat stomach before birthing dozens of little eggs with her last breath. We see the fruits of her labor, several times what was sown. It could imply that her faith is what allowed her to go to heaven and leave behind more opportunities for salvation of others. By dying to give birth, she sacrifices herself for humanity, an unnatural death of the egg paid for by the natural death of the girl. Compassionate, she spreads the seeds of faith by sowing them in the lives of others. Her breath becomes multiple eggs, which indicate that life will continue, traces of a new beginning. A slightly different reading is that whilst the eggs represent hope, they didn't spring from her faith being rewarded, but her dreams for a better future in this bleak world. Another theory is that the girl is the angel of Angel's egg. Firstly, in light of the previous passage that the egg sprung from her dreams for a better future, the earlier soundtrack, Dreaming Egg, could perhaps refer to herself. We also see in promotional posters that the girl is inside the egg or hatching from it, and the egg can be seen as literally her life. When it's broken, she dies. Moreover, if she is actually the angel or bird in the egg, the terrible fate the man feared was only accelerated by his own actions. Now we know the ending, I want to revisit the very beginning. The hand scene may have been cryptically foreshadowing this end. Two hands symbolic of two people, the boy and the girl, who meet with a distance, which eventually closes. and as one hand the boy crushes the egg, the other hand the girl vanishes. I want to talk about water again, which is omnipresent in Angel's Egg. Oshii allegedly cited Russian film director Andrei Tarkovsky as one of his inspirations. To me, this inspiration is apparent in his invasion of water, which is reminiscent of Tarkovsky's work. Water is a subtle yet strong underlying symbol, present throughout the film and more or less the only constant. Firstly, water is everywhere. It's persistent, endless, and in many forms, pouring, raining, bubbling, etc. It can also be taken as quite literally a city of water. I've touched upon the possibility that the city has already long been submerged. At the start of the film, the closest thing to God or the orb descends into the water. After it enters the water, waves emanate from the impact. This could be symbolic of the beginning of creation. One view is that the water is symbolic of the Holy Spirit. Initially, the girl collects small amounts of water and then stores it away. She's enamored by it, captivated by the water's ability to reflect. Water is her identity. She seeks it out as a necessary component of life. But early on in the film, the girl stares in the pond and imagines herself to be fully immersed, a premonition of her death. As a result, whilst water is often equated with being one of the most basic necessities for life, there exists this contradiction in which too much water, like a flood, is correlated with death and solitude. Water is therefore something to be simultaneously cherished and spurned. Traversing with the boy, the rain intensifies, rises, and begins to flood the city. Another perspective is that this flood is something that actually recurs every day, as opposed to something they fear. This has become a norm. It's a cycle that could promise cyclical renewal. With water, we also get this concept of reflection, which the girl stares at throughout the film. Thus, whilst having associations with illusions, water can be a mirror, reflecting our internal consciousness. In the water, the girl is reflected as an older woman. This is the reflection she longed for. The scene can be perceived in multiple ways. Firstly, it could be symbolic of baptism with the Holy Spirit whilst chasing the path of Jesus. Another angle may be that the reflection is merely an illusion representing the empty possibilities of imagination. Finally, this mirror or collapsing into herself could be a sign of either renewal or cyclical fate. By now you may have noticed there are lots of recurring symbols, such as the egg, the ark, the tree, and water, to name a few examples. Not only do we see these symbols literally recur, we also get this metaphorical spiral of recurrence, giving us a unique circular narrative. The themes largely tied to cyclical processes like water or life. If things recur or are circular, can any progress be made in this world or this story? This eternal recurrence of symbols implies that no progress can be made in this world. This fate isn't something you break out of, it always recurs. Its cyclical nature heavily suggests that this world is fated to its cycles. Freedom from this fate is impossible. The ark will be built and the flood will occur. For instance, the girl's fate, her vision or dream of being submerged in water, is later realized when she falls to her death. At the end of the film, her ascension could be confirmed. The boy sees the young girl turned into stone amongst the other statues which are perched on God. She's immortalized as a child rather than an adult form like the other statues. She sits as though she's the sacred Virgin Mary, with an egg in her lap in the place of baby Jesus. In a sense, it may also be that the girl has died and gone to heaven, being returned to God, represented by the orb. The boy, devoid of faith, is unable to join her. Others consider this evidence that she has failed her mission. If she had protected the egg, humanity would have been given another chance and broken out of this cycle. Instead, she drowns and perishes. It's not a leap to say, considering its cyclical nature and the amount of statues, that this is not the first time this has occurred. The whole film felt like deja vu. As a result, it could be that each one of these statues was once a dove or angel sent out but failed their trial to bring about salvation for humanity. Unworthy of God's graces, they failed in regaining the right to live, each of them drowning. The orb can therefore be seen as a graveyard or afterlife. It may also be argued that the girl retained her blind faith and through her martyrdom was rewarded with sainthood. It's therefore ironic that figures who chase blind faith are those that are worshipped. The final shot is perhaps a homage to the last shot of Tarkovsky's Solaris. We see this excruciatingly slow pan, which appears to confirm that the film took place on what would likely be an overturned version of Noah's Ark. This slow zoom adds to the sentiment that the world has been abandoned by God and contrasts against the girl quickly fleeing or leaving the ark at the very beginning. It supports this idea she is actually the dove or angel, leaving a trail of feathers. Thanks for watching. There's also a lot I left out, so feel free to comment about what you thought about Angel's Egg.